Hello, this is Helen Motti, and I want to welcome you to For Eternity.
I put my heart in your hands and you taught me to fly.
Hebrews 13, verses 1-3 exhorts us to let brotherly love continue. Do not forget to entertain strangers, for by so doing some have unwittingly entertained angels. Remember the prisoners as if chained with them, those who are mistreated, since you yourselves are in the body also. For the past almost 3 years, Syria has increasingly dominated both the media and the world political stage. Covering an area that has experienced many invasions and occupations over the centuries, from Romans and Mongols to Crusaders and Turks, it was at one time the centre of the Islamic Empire. It is a land of contrasts, of high mountains, deserts and fertile plains, and many diverse religious and ethnic groups make their home there. These include Kurds, Assyrians, Druze, Armenians, Alawite Shia, Christians and Arab Sunnis. The majority of the Muslim population are made up of Arab Sunnis. In 1946, modern Syria gained its independence from France, and since then, because of the conflicting interests of these diverse ethnic and religious groups, has endured periods of political instability. A BBC report of October 8, 2012 stated, "The government deals harshly with domestic opposition. Tens of thousands are estimated to have been killed in the suppression of the 1982 uprising of the Muslim Brotherhood in Hama. Following the death of Hafez al-Assad in 2000, Syria underwent a brief period of relaxation. Hundreds of political prisoners were released, but real political freedoms and a shake-up of the state-dominated economy never materialised. In 2011-12, security forces used tanks, gunfire and mass arrests to try to crush anti-government street protests inspired by the Arab Spring in Tunisia, Egypt and Libya. These protests rapidly took on a more formal nature when the opposition began to organise political and military wings for a long uprising against the Ba'ath government. As 2012 wore on, the standoff escalated into civil war, with defections from the governing elite signalling the steady collapse of central authority. In recent years, Syria has become increasingly isolated on the world stage, coming under heavy criticism for its role in Lebanon's civil war in the 1970s. Following the assassination of Lebanese former Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri, Syria pulled its armies out of Lebanon in 2005, with a UN report implicating Syrian and pro-Syria Lebanese officials in the murder, though this continues to be denied by Damascus. Syria is also accused of supporting insurgents in Iraq. The BBC continues in its report, "Syria's isolation showed brief signs of easing after efforts by France to bring Syria back into the international fold in 2008. But Syria's violation of a UN ban on arming the Lebanese Hezbollah militia led to the extension of US sanctions in May 2010. Further international sanctions were imposed amid the bloody repression of protests in the descent into civil war. By December 2012, the US, Turkey, Gulf states, France and Britain had recognised the main opposition national coalition of the Syrian revolution as the sole legitimate representative of the Syrian people, signalling their belief that the Assad government is beyond redemption. The rise of the Al-Nusra Front, a radical Islamist militia allied to Al-Qaeda, in rebel ranks led to a marked cooling of international and regional support for the opposition in mid-2013 and allowed the government and its Hezbollah allies to launch a counter-offensive. The Assad governments have been among the most intransigent opponents of peace with Israel and have supported several anti-Israel armed groups, most notably Hezbollah and the Gaza-based Palestinian group Hamas. Hopes for reconciliation have repeatedly foundered over Syria's support for these groups and the vexed question of the Golan Heights. This is modern-day Syria. We have all heard about the Arab Spring and have all witnessed, via the media predominantly, the huge repercussions of that movement. But what was it really? Let's listen to Norman McLaughlin from Open Doors share how his passion for the Muslim world was ignited, and also a perspective on the Arab Spring.
When I was a uni student in Queen's University, Belfast, I remember clearly to this day a particular event that happened. It was put on by Youth for Christ. It was called Mission Fest. It was on a Saturday afternoon and then with an evening celebration in Belfast. And they put on this event where they talked about the cause of mission in really every part of the world. And that day it became very clear to me as they outlined what was happening in Latin America and parts of Asia and Africa and the Middle East and elsewhere, that the most neglected and the most difficult part of the world for mission was the Muslim world. And I remember that day at the evening celebration, you could fill in a little card at the end of the evening where you basically signed your name and said that I'm willing to do whatever the Lord asks me or calls me to do. That day I caught the passion for the Muslim world, and it's never left me. And I've travelled many times to the Muslim world and started travelling from that point, and really have just been open to however the Lord would use me ever since.
I've heard you speak about when you visited Damascus.
Yes.
Could you just briefly share that experience and how you found just meeting ordinary, everyday Muslims on the street and how that impacted you?
Yes. And that was, I just mentioned about catching a heart for the Middle East, and that was back, well, I'll not say how old I am here, but in 1996, which was a few years after this had happened, I had the opportunity to get a free flight somewhere, and I flew into Damascus in Syria on my own with a backpack. And what I experienced for the next 2 weeks was, not a lot of people spoke English, so you couldn't have many conversations as such, but I experienced the tremendous hospitality of the people, because people would just, I'd meet people on buses or in the street or taxi drivers or whatever it might be, or in cafes and so on, and people would just literally treat me as a guest in their country and would invite me to stay in their home for the night, or would make me meals, or would make me tea, or give me drinks. And one night I went and stayed with a family in a village right off the beaten track, and it was the most incredible experience, because this particular family was just a husband and wife with one child. They had a one-bedroom house, and they already had guests staying with them. So the ladies and the one child were sleeping in the one bedroom, and the two men, and then plus myself, slept on couches in the living room, but had a tremendous experience of their hospitality as they put on this lavish dinner. I don't know whether they eat like that every day, but I presume they probably don't, and just experienced throughout those 2 weeks the warmth and hospitality of the people there.
We could learn an awful lot from these people.
Indeed.
Just in regards to hospitality, how to treat the stranger in our land.
Indeed.
We have all heard a lot about the Arab Spring. Can you give us a brief summary of what has been happening, and particularly how this has impacted believers in countries like Egypt?
Yes, the Arab Spring began in Tunisia, and this was really the beginning of 2011. Began in Tunisia, spread to Libya, Egypt and Syria. There were a few of the other Gulf states involved, but they ultimately the sort of demonstrations fizzled out in those places. But in Tunisia, Libya and Egypt, in each case, the people were rising up because, economic conditions and so on, and the way social conditions and so on, people without jobs and in poverty and wanting to have a better life and having opportunities in life. So people basically rose up to overthrow their leaders, their dictators, which was obviously Gaddafi in Libya, Hosni Mubarak in Egypt, Ben Ali in Tunisia. And in each case, those leaders were overthrown and replaced by democratically elected governments. But in each of those three countries I've mentioned, when the democratic elections happened, the people who got into power were actually Islamists. In other words, those who were democratically elected, who wanted to bring an Islamic regime to countries which had previously been living under much more secular regimes. And so for the people, Muslim and Christian alike, who many of them don't want to live under that is what they have now experienced. And so in Libya and Tunisia, that continues to this day. In Egypt, 1 year after the election of Morsi, the Muslim Brotherhood president, he was overthrown, removed by the military, and because, again, he had not delivered on promises that were made to improve conditions in the country, and the people again rose up to overthrow him at that time.
Can you share with us briefly what has been happening in these countries has impacted believers?
Yeah, I mean, the first one to mention, I'll not go into too much detail. I mean, Iraq in the Middle East, ever since the Second Gulf War, which is 2003, so 10 and more years now since that happened, 2/3 of the Christian population have left the country because they've literally been chased out of the country by Islamic extremists. People who've lived for many generations in one place, and all of a sudden they've been thrown out of their homes. We're seeing the same thing happening in Syria, where a huge proportion of the population is now displaced. And I'm talking not just about Christians, but Muslim people, moderate Muslim people as well. And so in Syria, where just 2 or 3 years ago Open Doors was not even active because there was no persecuted church. In 2013, Syria is for us one of the most the countries where we'll certainly spend the most money in terms of projects that we have on the ground supporting Christians who've been displaced from their homes and literally don't even have anywhere to go or food to eat. So that's Syria. Egypt is a place which, because of what's happened with revolution and counter-revolution, we are seeing now a backlash against the Christian community, which some are saying there is the worst persecution they've seen since Roman times.
I've heard you say quite a number of times that in spite of all this horror and tragedy, there is an incredible movement of God's Spirit.
Yes.
And believers are having amazing opportunities to witness and to reach out.
That's right.
To their neighbours.
Yes. We've seen churches of different denominations who wouldn't have talked before. One of the tragic things in the Christian church everywhere, now coming together in unity to talk to each other and to pray and to stand together. But the other thing we're seeing, as you've just said, is the churches grasping the opportunity of civil war in Syria in particular, to say we now have an opportunity because people are crying out and people are needing something, and they're coming to the churches and they're seeing that opportunity to go out and meet the needs of the people and share Christ with them in practical ways, and to point them to Christ as their Saviour as well, and to bring that light of the gospel into dark lives. So tremendous to see how God is at work even in such difficult circumstances.
So Norman, as we finish, can you share what you believe Christians in countries like Australia can do, and what they can do more to support persecuted believers?
Yeah, one of the things, that we say in Open Doors that we're very aware of is, there's many great causes in the world that Christian people should quite rightly get involved in. Many great causes in witnessing for the good news of Christ in so many different situations. But there are situations where non-believers and governments and so on will get involved as well. But when it comes to the persecuted church, no one else is going to help unless we, the church, help. And so my passion and my desire is to see Christians in Australia and around the world, and really our desire is that every Christian in Australia would be aware of the persecuted church and aware of how they can help. To pray, to be informed and to pray intelligently, and we provide resources and materials to allow people to do that. To give to the projects where we can support on the ground, whether it's practical humanitarian support for those, for example, in Syria who've lost everything, whether it's providing Bibles, training leaders, all sorts of different ways.
So what is it like to be a Christian believer in Syria today?
Syria is a country with a majority of Sunni Muslims, but ruled by a non-religious government rooted in a Shia branch, the Alawites. Despite or because of this particular situation, the Christian community, which represents about 10% of the total population, has benefited from a relative freedom of religion.
The situation in Syria for the Christians has always been that there is freedom for them to a certain degree throughout the past days. Christians in Syria truly had the opportunity to worship God freely, to go into their places of worship like their churches, and nobody will bother them. But the only thing that they had restrictions in is that they were not allowed to go and evangelize in the streets.
But in February 2011, the situation dramatically changed in Syria, leading the country into a civil war. Instead of calling it the Arab Spring, some Syrians are calling it the Arab Nightmare.
After my specialisation as orthopaedist, I came back with my wife from France to serve my people in Homs. When the turmoil started in Homs, I decided to come in this Christian hospital in order to help the refugees. There was no security in Homs. We were going to work, but after 2 p.m. it was too dangerous to venture out in the streets.
The majority of Christians in Homs were forced to leave, and so they have left Homs and went either to the surrounding Christian valley or to Damascus. But even in some villages in the surrounding Christian valleys, they've been also been threatened and attacked, and so they also had to leave that area and go to Damascus. The church has been rising up because of the support that they're getting from outside. To take their place and to reach out with acts of mercy and compassion to others. So they've been reaching out to them with medical help, with food rations, with clothes, with trying to find what's the immediate needs they have and trying to reach them with that and provide that immediate need. And they do that for all kinds of background, people from backgrounds, Christian background, Muslim backgrounds, because they don't discriminate and they want to love and reach out to everybody. They don't only reach out to them with food rations and relief work, but they reach out to them with the love of God and with the word of gospel.
Those people, many families, hundreds of families, we are helping people who came from Homs here, families. We are helping families in Homs itself through our church there, especially displaced people who lost their homes and who had to come here, in many cases just in their clothes, and they need everything that you could think of. So the church is going in two directions, trying to do both things at the same time, taking care of what's going on right now and preparing for the great things in the future.
We see how the church in Syria has been fasting and praying for years before this happened. They were fasting and praying for a revival, for changed heart in Syria. And so God's way is different than ours.
You know, it was really a shock for the church to see our country just going through this turmoil. But amazingly, the church responded very strongly. First, it was much more united, and we were united in prayer, and prayer was a major, and still is, a major activity of the church now. We hear of killing every day, and that hurts everybody. Everybody is really suffering of this. But at the same time, we see many more people receptive to the gospel. We see people having heart to help each other and really doing the relief work in full passion just to reach with the love of Christ.
Did we catch that? The church in Syria has been fasting and praying for years before this happened. They were fasting and praying for revival, for changed hearts in Syria. And so God's way is different than ours. I have reflected on this extraordinary comment made by my sister in Syria. When we talk about revival here in Australia, or indeed anywhere in the West, I am fairly confident that we are not associating the working and experiencing of the Holy Spirit with a bloody civil war. We are not thinking that worsening oppression and persecution of followers of Christ that is unimaginable to us is possibly God's answer to the very prayers that his people have been praying. Isn't revival supposed to happen within the parameters of our expectations, expressed or not? Isn't revival meant to be a blessing? Well, maybe we should start redefining our concept of blessing and returning to the biblical New Testament expression and meaning of it. I would like to read to you from Matthew 5. And seeing the multitudes, he, Jesus, went up on a mountain, and when he was seated, his disciples came to him. Then he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you, and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. I don't think we are too excited about Christ's definition of what it is to be blessed. One commentary states, in the Beatitudes, Jesus overturns many commonly accepted social mores and teachings that those who lack are more blessed than those who have it all. Another says, Jesus' message in the so-called Sermon on the Mount challenges us to rethink our values and priorities. He promises rich blessings to the poor, the downtrodden and the humble, people we wouldn't ordinarily think of as especially blessed. And finally, Jesus turns human social order on its head by stating that it is humility, gentleness and purity that God truly values, rather than power or wealth. So the Christians in Syria had been praying for revival for years. They are convinced that God answered them by plunging their country into chaos, uncertainty and civil war. I have been asking myself the question, does Australia need to experience a horrific civil war so that true revival can come to the church?
We see a lot of positive responses. People are not blaming God, saying, "Where is God?" People are asking questions and are much more receptive to the gospel. Even with my fellow doctors, the door is much more open to share the gospel.
Let's enjoy believers worshipping amidst the blessing of difficulties and uncertainty. These Christians are singing, "Our Jesus lives." Could we sing the same if we were in their circumstances? I would like to read to you a report from inside Syria. It is titled, "Revival in Syrian Church in the Midst of Civil War." All the names in this article are changed for security reasons. While the situation in this country is worsening every day, more and more Syrians find God and join the church. This is the revival we have been praying and fasting for years. Pastor Yusuf from Damascus has a hole in each of his pastor suits. It's the result of a bullet going through the house when the family wasn't home. Since the civil war started in Syria, life in the country has become increasingly difficult. The Christians face extra difficulties, being the target of specific threats like kidnapping and violence. Although Syria has a Christian history, Muslim Syrians tell Christian Syrians to go back to their own country. In their view, Christians belong to the Western world. Since December 2012, over 10,000 Christian families have fled their houses. Their neighbourhoods are soon taken over by Salafists who rule in Homs and parts of Aleppo with the extreme rules of the Sharia. You see people walking around without hands. They must have stolen something, Pastor Yusuf says. Those who live there are in danger 24/7. With the sounds of war going on around the house, Pastor Yusuf tucks in his 2 young girls every night, preparing them for what could happen. If a bomb explodes, you might see a lot of blood, and it might hurt a little. But if we die, we will close our eyes here and reopen them in heaven.
When it's all been said and done, there is just one thing that matters. Did I do my best to live for truth? Did I live my life for you? And when it's all been said and done, all my treasures will mean nothing. Only what I've done for love's reward will stand the test of time. Lord, your mercy is so great that you look beyond our weakness and find purest gold in miry clay, making sinners into saints. And I will always sing your praise here on earth and ever after. For you've shown me heaven's my true home. When it's all been said and done, you are my life when life is done. When it's all been said and done, there is just one thing that matters. Did I do my best to live for truth? Did I live my life for you? Lord, I live my life for you.
Although the war in Damascus isn't as fierce as in other parts of the country, people in Damascus too are scared and nervous. They don't feel safe anywhere and stay inside as much as possible. The children check the bins of their schools for bombs every morning before they go in. Yusuf's wife, Hannah, says, "In the midst of this situation, God provides the people with protection. God has saved us many times by showing us the location of bombs so they could be disarmed." The Christians get little support from in or outside the country, but the pastor sees the blessings God gives them through the chaos in the country. If there is no earthly thing to trust in, you have to trust in God, and this is what he teaches us to do through this difficult situation. In this time of sorrow, the church of Pastor Yusuf has been a refuge for many Christians and non-Christians. Women whose men have left to fight in the war come to the church to hear about the gospel. The church saw their prayers for the people of Homs fulfilled in a way they never had expected. "We have been praying and fasting for a church of our denomination to open in Homs for many years," Pastor Yusuf explains. But God had other plans. He sent the people of Homs to our church, and the revival is happening right there. They renew their faith in the midst of this crisis. Those who have fled their houses have lost everything, their sources of income, schooling for their children, and any kind of medical help. Open Doors is directly helping the local church in Syria and is strengthening them in order to survive. They hope this will encourage the church to stay in the country. Partnering with local churches, they supply the internally displaced with relief packages and winterization packages. If needed, medical support and help to find shelter is provided. But most importantly, Open Doors encourages the Christians spiritually, providing them with training and Bibles. It's important the church stays in Syria. Hannah stresses, if the church leaves Syria, Syria will be spiritually destroyed. The Christians don't know what to expect in the future. Although the Salafists claim to accept the Christians see a different reality in the country already. We don't agree with the regime, but we fear the Islamic government that might come in the future will be worse, especially for the Christians. The faith of the Syrian Christians is strong. Pastor Yusuf and his family have stopped watching television because, in their opinion, the broadcasters only share lies. Instead, they turn to God every morning to guide them through the day and to provide them with the things they need to know. People in their church follow their example. "We get our news from heaven," they say. It gives them peace and strength to carry on. God has saved us so far, so we are still needed, Pastor Yusuf says. If we keep praying, God will do something incredible. This is what we all feel.
إلهي كم أنت جميل رغبتي هي أن ألقاك عندما تنظر إلى روحي الفقيرة تبعث فيها الرجاء إلى
I would like to finish by sharing with you about the work and perspective of a youth pastor who chooses to stay in a war zone because he is convicted that's where God wants him to be. The article is aptly named, God is at work in our country. The noise of bombs, rockets and gunshots are heard in many places 24 hours a day in Syria. Thousands of people are on the run for the violence. But God is at work, we hear several Christians say. Christians that stayed in Syria are also saying, this is a great opportunity God is offering to the church to get out of our church buildings and reach out to the people. Andreas, we changed his name for security reasons, a 28-year-old youth worker of one of the churches in Aleppo, sees the moment in Syrian history as God's grace. We as church were too focused on ourselves, on our own congregation. It seems that we needed the civil war to leave the four walls of our church building and help those in need outside our congregations. Andreas sees Aleppo as the place God wants him to be. But he and his family did also flee the city as the cruel reality of the civil war came too close. A rocket hit our neighbour's house. The explosion damaged our house as well. We already were thinking about leaving because my sick parents couldn't get the medicine they needed in Aleppo. His father, mother and their 6 children fled to a coastal city in Syria. We first repaired our house very provisionally, and then 2 months ago we left. For my parents it is better here. Now they can get their medicine again and they get better. Also, in this city, it is a challenge to get the medicine. Many times I have to search at 10 different places to find them, but at the end I can buy the medicine somewhere. When the youth worker tells about the situation in his country, at times his eyes fill with tears. At moments his voice isn't that steady. But these tears are rapidly replaced by a big smile on his face. I believe and see that God is at work in the country. God made churches come out of their 4 walls. In the past, we only had our choirs, our activities for the members of the church. Now I see churches reaching out and working together to make a difference in the country. They are coming out of their comfort zone. Thank God that He is using all for His glory. This period is a gift. It is God's grace to us. We now really can deny ourselves. We can evangelize and reach out. Then, lowering his voice, he says, I believe that the church needs the martyrs. Through them, the revival comes. Then Andreas, all of a sudden, sings a phrase of a well-known song. God will make a way. That is what is going to happen in Syria. God will make His way.
God will make a way where there seems to be no way. He works in ways we cannot see. He will make a way for me. He will be my guide, hold me closely to His side. With love and strength for each new day, He will make a way. He will make a way. Oh, God will make a way where there seems to be no way. He works in ways we cannot see. He will make a way for me. He will be my guide, hold me closely to His strength for each new day. He will make a way. He will make a way. With love and strength for each new day, He will make a way. He will make a way.
What are the most critical needs for Syrian believers, and in fact all who are living in that country? From a 2012 report from Open Doors, food, blankets, heating are some of the major needs in the country now, especially to the internally displaced people, IDPs, in the region around Homs, a pastor from that region says. The south of the country is the part of the country less affected by the fighting, but you see that also there the economy has come to a standstill. In this agricultural region, they can't sell their products now. Export is impossible, but also the transport of the fruits and vegetables to the big cities in Syria almost stopped. It is simply too dangerous on the roads, a relief worker that wants to stay anonymous says. The pastor of one of the churches in Damascus that is very involved in relief work to the IDPs says, the situation in Damascus is very desperate for the refugees. In the city we still can buy the things they need. Only bread is a problem at the moment. There is no flour anymore. The problem for us is that it takes much longer before we get all the relief products and the prices go up. A bottle of gas, for example, used for cooking in the house is more than 5 times more expensive than before the conflict in the country. The pastor says, but a bigger problem for the refugees is the rent. The refugees in Syria don't live in camps. They are accommodated in rented apartments or houses, and they themselves don't have the cash to pay the rent. They came with nothing, only some suitcases they could carry, nothing more. Most of the refugees lost their income, so this is a big issue. His wife adds, the need is huge. Hundreds of families came without anything. Where do we have to start? We can't do this ourselves. We need other countries to help. Most refugees lost everything, the pastor adds. They even have no house to go back to. Many houses are destroyed or occupied by others. Every day you see new refugees coming in small trucks, sometimes 3 generations, bringing some plastic bags, a few mattresses, not knowing where to go. Schools in Damascus were until very recently mostly functioning normally. With the violence coming closer to the capital, more schools have closed. In Aleppo and in the Kurdish area, the schools are mainly closed. How can we pray for the believers in Syria? In the words of a believer there, we really want to thank you for your support. God gives us supernatural peace. This is really a gift to us. Your support to make the relief to the refugees possible, and your prayers are very precious to us. They thank God for the opportunities he gives to Christians to be salt and light in the darkness of this moment in Syrian history. For the churches that are involved in the relief work, to make the right decisions, to get the help to the right persons. In the words of Andreas again, thank God that he is using all for his glory. This period is a gift. It is God's grace to us. We now really can deny ourselves. We can evangelize and reach out. I believe that the church needs the martyrs. Through them the revival comes. Please join me next week as we visit Christian believers in Laos and Vietnam. This is Helen Motti for Eternity.